having a formula that just is about butts and seats is very detrimental. It gives us a false sense of success in saying we're reaching people and we're affecting change because we have butts and seats, and each year we're growing, but we're not affecting change in our community. And two, we're lowering the standard for what it is to be a disciple and a follower of Jesus.
What's up, friends? Welcome to another episode of the Radical Middle Podcast, where we jump into the tension and we talk about the things that you wish your church talked about. I'm always here with my man, Fredy. Fredy, how are you, bro?
Bro, I am excited and a little bit hungry.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You know what you need?
What do I need?
You need McDonald's.
Yeah, I love McDonald's. I need a Big Mac right now in my life.
Me and Fredy were talking about, we grew up on McDonald's, man. Like, I probably ate a ridiculous amount of McDonald's growing up in the 80s.
We used to go there to celebrate everything, man.
Oh, bro.
Everything. Soccer games, graduations, everything.
Yeah, man. Some of them nuggets.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I was thinking about McDonald's because today I want to talk about this idea like American Jesus and how American Jesus has really kind of shaped everything, right? And just really jump into the tension of like this kind of version of American Jesus and Christianity and how we grow our churches and that whole deal. And so I was thinking about McJesus, right? Now check this out. So talking about McDonald's, I looked up McDonald's mission and vision because they have one. All right, so here it is. This is McDonald's mission. Our mission is to make delicious, feel-good moments easy for everyone. That's it. Our mission is to make delicious, feel-good moments easy for everyone. And this got me thinking about American Jesus, McJesus.
Oh.
Because I feel like in the church, what we've done is we've been like, we need to make delicious, feel-good moments easy for everyone. We need to make delicious Jesus moments easy for everyone. We just want you to experience, pieces of God or some type of euphoria, like a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
We might make it easy for you. Why? So you keep on coming back.
Right.
Right? Just like you and me as kids, man. I kept on coming back for them nuggets and then fries. It's delicious. And so, yeah, man. So that's what I was like, man, let's get into that today because I was thinking about it. And so, okay, here's my question, since I always got a question for you.
Yeah.
So how do we grow our churches? What's the formula for growing a church in the United States today? What's the American Jesus way?
There is an American movement that was started in the early 2000s. It has a 3-letter acronym, and I just saw an issue of their magazine where they talk about the formula is launching big. So it's a big launch.
Okay, yeah.
So you need a
With
good
the soft launch and the
and the gatherings and stuff like that, and being connected, and also like putting money into children's ministry.
Yeah.
Making sure that they are happy when they're at church service, having a stellar worship experience where the music is good and the singer can sing. Yeah. And then having a very good charismatic communicator. Yeah. That is attractional, that looks the part, that models the typical ideal of a healthy family. Yeah. And yeah, man, it's that's the formula right now to be able to start a church and get a church off the ground.
So what's wrong with that?
What is wrong with that? Well,
is there anything? I mean,
no. Well, it looks like they have a success rate, and by they determining success is churches that are still active after 5 years of launch. They're at like 77%. So if the question is what's wrong with it, if your measure of success is it still open, then there's nothing wrong with it. It looks like because it's a model that's being replicated no matter in rural the United States and in metropolitan cities in the United States. Now, what's wrong with it? I would say that, bro, we're gonna get in trouble today. We're gonna get in trouble today. I am shocked that we've not been canceled yet. And so by the grace of God, we're still here. But man, I would say what is wrong with it is that we've come up with a formula to be able to pump these out. McDonald's, I mean, I love the movie The Founder.
Oh yeah, dude, I like that movie too.
With Ray Kroc.
It blew my mind.
Bro, we're huge McDonald's fans, bro.
I know, I don't eat it anymore. He's mad, dude.
so
this conversation's done.
So, because nobody has Cokes like McDonald's Cokes, bro. And you can get them for $1. Anyway, Ray Kroc, was pretty much the genius behind it. It said, hey, this little restaurant, hamburger joint, right, in California has the formula for speedy service. Everybody knows what they're getting. It's affordable, etc. And he wanted to replicate that, right, on his path to success, and then became a multi-billion-dollar company by purchasing land, etc. It's a great movie. You've got to watch it. I love that movie. But what ends up happening, Tommy, is that McDonald's isn't contextualized to its communities because it doesn't have to.
Right.
McDonald's is a business, and they're in the business of making money. So all they have to do is replicate themselves everywhere. It doesn't matter if there's McDonald's in hospital buildings, bro.
Which is so dumb,
which is crazy, right? So after
that's why the reason why you're in that hospital.
Yeah, after you have your cardiac, surgery, you could go back and get a Big Mac. And so what do they're in the business of making money. They're in the business of making profit. So they just need to replicate themselves. When it comes to the church there should be. It's going to be really hard to have two replicas of the same church because no two communities are alike. Yeah. They're all different. They have served different people. And so having a formula that just is about butts and seats is very detrimental because it gives us a false sense of success in saying we're reaching people and we're affecting change because we have butts and seats and each year we're growing, but we're not affecting change in our community. And two, we're lowering the standard for what it is to be a disciple and a follower of Jesus. So that's where I think it's wrong.
Yeah, so it's weird because, even if the McDonald's metaphor, it's like, they found something that worked, right? But the original McDonald's brothers, right, they got screwed out.
Yeah, they got screwed
McDonald's, right? But the thing is like, okay, we figured out something that works. And because of that, the metric became how many burgers were sold, right? Mm-hmm. And it used to be on the sign, right? It was like over 1 billion that, served, people served, whatever. It was like how many, so it was bottom line that. But when we think about like, how do we make delicious feel-good moments easy for everyone? Like that's basically, this gospel that we've been like selling. But in my following of Christ, like that's not what I've experienced. I'm like, it's not always easy. In fact, it's rarely been easy. It's not always delicious. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really hard and it's not always feel good moments. It's like, but that's what we're producing. And then that's what people expect. And then, the metric becomes something that's much easier to like how many people showed up. So then we're in the business, McDonald's is in the business of hamburgers. And it feels like sometimes the church is in the business of just of gathering. Yeah. How many people can we gather?
Butts and seats.
But we know that Matthew 28, Jesus calls us to discipleship. And discipleship is so much harder. The relational component of that, the life, the season, the difficulty, the suffering with others, that's really hard. It's almost like you get invited to go to McDonald's and they're like, hey man, that ice cream machine broke down again. Can you come back here and help me fix it?
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I just wanted an ice cream. Now all of a sudden I got to jump behind the counter and fix it. That's not right. And we hear a lot from people that too, where it's like there's other layers to that, where it's like, man, all my church wants from me is just to serve. So that's the tension, right? You got both, And obviously not all churches are like that.
Right.
And here's the reality. There's great things happening at all those churches. Like, I'm not against that, and I'm not saying that God doesn't work in and through it, but I would challenge the overall system of it just to say, what kind of expectations are we setting up for people? And then is the system of kind of McJesus, and the way we plant churches and the way we do that, how conducive is that to the abundant life that Christ talks about in John 10:10?
Yeah.
Where how many people in this space are experiencing the abundant life, and for how long?
Bro.
Because I wonder that. And I think it really is an American framework philosophically of like, hey, the American dream, you just work hard. If you consume the right things, right? Yeah. So you work hard so you can consume the right things that keeps the economy going, and then you can achieve the American dream. Like you get the house and the vacations and the boat and the whatever. That's the syncretism, I think, that's also seeped into the church in a major way, where it stopped becoming like this revolutionary, like underground movement, and it's just this mainstream, like, it's just what it is. And I say that, all right, friends who are pastors, you're a pastor. I've planted a church. I was a pastor. I'm still ordained. And yet, at the same time, no, I don't know any pastors personally that have gone into this just to be like, I'm going to make a lot of money, or I'm going to, like, I know that all these pastors, like, have started out, they have a heart for Jesus. They have a heart to reach people, but it's really hard. And so they hold on to this, like, kind of McJesus thing, and this is how you do it. But I just find people that are like, it's just burning them out. Yeah. And I don't know if it's really working.
Yeah. The issue is when you do have a metric that seems to serve, and you have a good percentage, right, when you're judging success by that metric. Hey, we're still open. Here's butts and seats. Here's the gathering numbers. What you end up doing is those pastors who plant churches and don't live up to those metrics, like their launch is like their like family and like maybe a neighbor,
right?
Like how the church started in Acts, with people they were actually discipling.
Yeah. They feel like failures.
They feel like failures, bro.
They're not.
They feel like failures, or like, like, hey, like we don't have interest nights. We have prayer nights, and we're just praying together. And so at an interest night, you'll get 50, 100 people who are curious to see if they'll join your church when it opens. Very few people come over to pray, and so they feel like failures because they're trying to follow a biblical model for running a church, leading a church, being a part of a church, but then they see this American way of succeeding in church planting, and they start to feel like failures, like they feel out of place. That there's just tension that isn't able to coexist, Tommy. And I feel like that is the danger when we make a one-size-fits-all solution to what is the kingdom of God. Every apostle was sent to different places, and I off the top of my head, I don't remember who went to Ethiopia and who stayed in Jerusalem, and who was, Paul was called to the Gentiles, and there was all these apostles that they were just split everywhere. They didn't lead their local churches in the same way,
right? Yeah,
and I think they contextualized the gospel to who they were serving and to who they were reaching. And nowadays, when we have this formula on how to, it's basically an enterprise. We have this formula on how to like launch big and how to continue and push and use the momentum. And there is validity to it. There is, it works. And to be honest, that's how I would launch a campus. That's how I would probably launch a church today. But I think they missed a component. They missed a component when they aren't discipling people. And nowadays, I see a lot of churches, what they're doing is they're not launching with people who aren't Christian or unchurched or dechurched. They're launching with people from other churches.
Yeah, it's all the transfer growth.
Yeah, it's all the transfer. Like, hey, we launched with 100 people today, and it's like, yeah, but those people, like, I was talking to a friend the other day, man, and he was just talking to me about the vision, for his church and stuff like that, and what they're gonna do with this and the other. And not once did I hear, hey, we're gonna go into the local high school, and see how we're gonna serve them. Not once did I hear, man, the need of our city is XYZ. I talked to police officers, and they told me that this is the number one crime in the city, in the neighborhood. Not once did I hear just a heartbreaking for lost people. And so when we have formulas, man, and when we make Jesus this movement, we depersonalize it. And man, we're in the people business. We're in the soul business. UYWI, like all everything that we do, our churches, we're in the business of saving souls, partnering with Christ in doing that. And when we just use formulas and try to create these enterprises, Tommy, like we depersonalize what it is to serve Jesus, what it is to fight for the lost and pray for them and reach them, and we end up becoming, and what's bothersome is that we end up becoming like all those other churches, and now the churches aren't our allies, they're our competitors.
Oh yeah, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like if you plant a church down the street and I plant a church down the street, it's like, man, if we want to both launch strong, we're both kind of go through that pool of people, of disgruntled Christians that don't like their church anymore, that feel that their season has ended in their church. You and I are probably going to vie and hopefully get the same, like, man, you want to build a media team and a worship team, and I want to build a media and a worship team day one. And we're probably going to be like having lunch with the same people. And it's like, now we become competitors as opposed to collaborators.
Right. And which is like, it's just, I think that baffles people who don't follow Christ. They're just like, I don't get it. I'm good. Right. You know, like I don't understand. I thought you guys were all about the same thing, but and then we got to be real hardcore about our distinctives and like, well, we really teach the Bible here. Like we're not, you know, and then it just causes like this ugly division. Young people aren't having it. They're like, I'm good. I'm out.
Okay. But just real time. Yeah. So even that statement, right? We really teach the Bible here. Well, aren't you throwing shade at, like a non-Christian wouldn't know.
Right. They're like,
that there are churches that don't teach the Bible, that don't really teach the Bible. Right.
I get it. Yeah. And that it causes that kind of competition. And so we're fighting for this. It's a scarcity mentality. We're fighting for these scraps. And you're like, do you know how many people are in our city? Like, we're fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially, man, in urban spaces in the hood, dude, there's churches on every corner and they all got like 15 people. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man. But the thing that we talked about this, I think it was last episode, man, we talked about the industrial Christian complex. And I think it goes to this piece of the kingdom of God as well, where you're like, we're only giving resources or ups to these certain types of movements, which doesn't discount them. Like these church growth movements and these ways to do it. Yeah. Like, okay, cool. Can God use that? Yeah, absolutely. But it gets presented like this is the way. And it's like, no, it's not. You could do this in so many different ways. God, Elohim, and Genesis 1 says in the beginning, Elohim, which means strong creator. He's like creator. He's creative. And we're made in his image. We're creative. We can come up with all types of ways. Yeah. Where it doesn't cost $100,000 for you to launch a church, you know, where it doesn't, and then feel really good when you got that church of 12 that's meeting in your home and you're discipling and walking with, like, that's that, like, this movement of God, which is really beautiful. And so to feel, though, that, like, all the resources and all the things and all the conferences are only about and around, like, these big movements, which is really based on church growth, which the church growth movement was from, really, the ideas came from the 60s, and it was from a missiological movement. It came actually birthed out of my birthplace, was in Pasadena, but into the, you know, really looking at it in the 70s, and then the 80s and 90s, like, just exploded, right? But this is crazy to me, but one of the distinctive aspects of the church growth movement specifically was an emphasis on making disciples over securing decisions. And I feel like, man, that's where that started. That's good. And I don't know what happened to that along the way, right? I mean, it's like all of a sudden we realized you could get churches that were 10,000, 12,000, 15, like those are huge churches, right? And now you see the decline of all that. And so, it's like, dude, we're all making mistakes. All the stuff you and I talk about and all the stuff we're working on and doing, the next generation is going to come and be like, dude, this guy, Tommy thought this. That's fine. That's okay. And there's grace for those who at least played the game. Yep. Right? Took the risk. Cool. But I think there's always room to then challenge it. And the middle part of wrestling with it and going, well, what is it? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about gathering people. It's people who are actually following Christ. And when I planted our church, did I ever tell you this story, bro?
No.
Okay. I felt God said, go plant this church, which was the last thing I wanted to do. I was like, okay, I'm obedient though. Lord, I'll do whatever you want. I run into this guy. Somebody connected me with this church planner guy from some church planning org. And he's like, hey bro, like, hey, what church you going to? And what he was doing was he had planted a church, and that's the thing. I got to get you to come to my church.
He's
okay,
recruiting.
I get it. I go, yeah, let's meet. So we meet. He said, tell me your story, bro. And it's super kind of South Orange County, if you guys know what that means. And so he's like, tell me what was it like? Tell me what's your story, bro. And I told him the whole story of solidarity. Hey, I took God's word, love your neighbor as yourself. I moved into the barrio, and we've been living it out ever since. And it blew his mind. He's like, dude, I've never even heard, I don't even know he didn't know what to respond to that. I go, well, tell me your story. And he goes, yeah, man. And he got real. And he goes, yeah, last 3 years, man. Without like Jesus, my wife, and therapy, I don't think I would have got through it. And what he's talking about is planning his church. And I looked at him and I go, and that's what you want me to sign up for? Like, that can't be like that. Like,
Yeah.
No, dude. And so what I did when we planted the church, and this is probably more my rebellious side. I did everything opposite of what they tell you to do. So I didn't do a launch. I didn't post about it. I didn't use my giftings or personality to try to bring people to my church. We had prayer meetings for 12 weeks. And even the church I left, which I asked them to bless me out, which they're a little weird about, but I said, and I told that pastor, who was shady, by the way, that's a whole nother story. But I said, you know what? I want you to know I'm not going to actively take anybody from here. There was one other family that they want to start this with me. So, I'm not going to invite
anyone.
Because I didn't want to try to steal from the church.
Right.
So we did it exactly the opposite. Here's the thing. Beautiful. God moved. That church is still probably, it's like 9 years later. It's probably like maybe 50 people or 60 people still. So, but I did it at a pace that was manageable with 5 children, and people were discipled, and it's still continuing. But dude, it was hard.
Yeah.
So, but I wasn't willing to do it the way that even that guy shared with me, because I was like, dude, it almost like he was fully depressed. He was like, and I'm just like, is this what God? And then we put a theology to it, like, bro, that's just me, grinding out for Jesus. That's me, like, carrying, my burden. And I'm like, I swear Jesus said his yoke was easy and his burden was light. Like, and so then that's what we're experiencing internally. So internally in the church is a mess. My marriage is a mess. Like, all this stuff's like really struggling for people. But then I'm trying to tell people about the abundant life. Like, Jesus wants to heal you and save you.
Yeah.
Like, at the core of that's like just hypocritical.
Absolutely.
And I feel so sad for all the pastors out there. I'm like, that's what you're experiencing?
Yeah. There's something pastors that are listening to this, or maybe you that works or knows a pastor or works with or for a pastor, with a pastor that is this way, like, pray for them that they would be liberated from trying to feed the machine, right? The McJesus movement of like trying to live up to the fact that, man, if I launch with 50, at this point, at 3 years later, I have to have 150.
But you do, though, because that's the model that's been given to us. Mm-hmm. Because you're like, someone's going to give you this much money. You got to recoup it by this time. You got to get paid. And so you've got to do the things to make it sustainable. So you got to grow it. Yeah. And I'm just going, maybe that whole model isn't.
Well, because initially you start to look at people as dollar signs, right? To like like that. It's an ends to what is it? A means to an end,
yeah.
right? You start looking at people as like, okay, you start to make the calculations. If I get X amount of people being put them through my membership class or whatever program or whatever, and to become, giving members and volunteers, etc., then, and again, like we have to live in this tension. That's the reason we're talking about this. Isn't because it's like, the reason we're talking about this is because there's a radical middle where those things are true, where if a church gets to this level, guess what? It allows us to do more things. Yeah. And if it gets to this level, maybe our impact could be a little bit greater if we steward it well, etc. If we stay at this level down here, then our impact could be limited. But here's the thing that I want to free pastors from is this need to live up to an enterprise that Jesus did not establish for us here in the world. The Great Commission is go to all the world and make disciples, right? Teaching people, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our call is to discipleship first. And man, I love the idea that you guys had prayer meetings, you guys had Bible studies before you launched. There are multiple plethora of ways to do these things, to launch. And I wholeheartedly believe that God is calling us back to these things. It's we're practically in April. A recent the Royce Report, if you've not subscribed to her blog, like it's a beautiful journalistic organization that reports on, the Christian industrial complex and the things that needs to be reported on. And they do a very good, it's not a blog, it's a very good journalistic company. But she talks about, some of these movements, some of these church planting movements, and how, pushing charismatic leaders before they're ready and feeding their success and they succeed too soon usually is a recipe for disaster. So one of the metrics that they haven't measured yet is how many of those planting pastors are still the pastor in year 5. The church is still going, but maybe the pastor isn't there. So last year, one of these church planters planted 4.5 years ago, and his church within 4.5 years grew to 10,000 members in Houston, Texas. All right. Now in Houston, Texas, there's a bunch of churches because it's Texas. Yeah. So, but he ended up getting ousted by the church because he had an affair. His wife divorced him. A month later, he's been MIA, etc. He just recently came back on the scene. Hasn't said he's going to church plant again or whatsoever. His daughter, who's I think 17 years old, posted on social media. The reason I'm talking about it is because she's made it public and she's good to talk about it. She talked about how she hasn't forgiven her dad yet. And so she did one of these Instagram things where asking a question and people were asking her questions. Well, a lot of people, they were like, hey, what do you think about your dad's apology? What do you think about? And she was just like, I don't have a relationship with my dad. Wow. I'm having a hard time forgiving my dad. I'm struggling to still believe in God, and I love God and I love Jesus, but I'm struggling here. And I look at the damage because I look at the damage that this man made to his daughters, to his wife, to a lot of the people that believed in him and planted with him. Because you don't grow to 10,000 people in 4.5 years unless people sacrificially gave and sacrificially volunteered and worked in that mission. And the damage that he made in pursuit of that. So on the outside, you would say, man, that guy's killing it. And sure enough, he was already getting invited to conferences to speak, to give you the formula on church growth, to tell you how he's doing it down in Houston. He was coaching other church planters. He was speaking into other church planters' visions and execution and XYZ. But man, at what cost are we pursuing these things? And so we even had to make a decision, even with this podcast, because I think the church looks different and the expression of the body of Christ looks different. I think this podcast is church. And we had to make a decision. Tommy and I, we had to have a long, hard conversation about, hey, we can only record on these days. Yeah. Because we're not, we're going to give ourselves to it and we're going to give this an honest shot, but not at the expense of our families, not at the expense of our responsibilities, not at the expense of our health. And we're having these conversations, Tommy, because do we want to blow up day one? Do we want to have that number one podcast?
Sure.
100% we do. but it's not going to be at the expense of at the ministries that God has placed before us, our families, our friends, those that are in our local community. It's not going to be at that expense, Tommy. And so when we talk about this McJesus philosophy and way of thinking, what are some of the ways where, like, what are some of the red flags that maybe if we're in an organization or in a church that is all about that, what are some of the red flags that we could see?
Well, I mean, let's go back a little bit, man. Those kind of stories, I hear them all the time.
Yes.
I also hear all the stories of things that are leading up to that, whether it ends that way or not. I'm struck by surveys of pastors where a majority of pastors don't feel like they have any real friends, depression, sexual misconduct, and like through the roof. These numbers are crazy. And I'm looking at that and going, why do we keep on doing this to these leaders? Because then ultimately what's happening, friends, is, they built the 10,000 person church and then publicly fell from grace. And all the young people, the 17-year-old daughter and all that whole generation is like, man, you guys are full of crap. Like, why would I even waste my time? In fact, one point, so millions of them are leaving every year and these are people that are in the church. They're not like people that haven't heard the gospel.
Right.
Think about the millions that are just even not even have heard the gospel or kind of understand who Jesus is. And they're like, oh, that's what you guys are about? I'm good. Like, dude, so it's having a huge impact. And I just go, hey, if we keep on pulling people out of the river, maybe we should stop rescuing people out of the river and go upstream and find how are the bodies getting in the river? And how do you, there's a system of dumping people into the river. And so you're just going like, okay, and that's from like community development days. It's like, you're just going, what's the root problem? Right? And so what we do is then we look at that and we spiritualize both sides. One, we spiritualize the 10,000 number. And we're like, yeah, but look how God blessed it. And I'm like, okay, so one, we have an issue with how our understanding of God's blessing. And then the other thing that we do, we spiritualize that guy's fall, because then we're like, wow, dude, he had a choice. So all of a sudden when we're all winning together, it's like, yay, look how God's blessing us through this leader. But when he falls and it's like, this guy, so then you blame that guy. Yeah. Does he have a responsibility? Absolutely. But if it happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, then I just got to go, the system's got to be messed up. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm bringing up about the McJesus thing is I'm just saying, guys, can we talk about the system? And you'll come up, I know people probably go, yeah, but this always happens in conversations. They'll go, yeah, but my church. Like, yeah, sure, dude. Yeah. Bless your church. It's awesome. Yeah. But I got the receipts of so many church and so many issues and so many. Think about all the sexual scandal of the Baptist SBC, right? Think about the Catholic Church and all that sex scandal. Happening right now. Like it's all I'm not talking about a couple pastors. I'm talking about it's a systemic problem.
Yeah, even the financial scandals where pastors are using church money for lavish living, buying themselves luxury cars, taking these very expensive trips, buying
embezzlement. Yeah, I mean it's DUIs,
putting their family on the payroll.
I mean, guys, we're not. And here's the deal: we're not bashing. I love the church so much. We're practitioners, right? Like you're a pastor right now. I love the church. Like everything I do, I support leaders and pastors. But what I'm tired of is pulling people out of the river when I'm like, can we just change the system, right? And help so bodies stop falling into the river. That's what I care about. And so we have to have the conversation. And it's, I mean, the intersectionality of this is crazy. It's from American culture and syncretism and personal responsibility and toxic masculinity. And there's like, we talked a little bit about that. Like there's, and that's what makes it hard. And we like simple. And if you're going to continue to have power and money and control, you got to make things real simple for people. You got to point out what the enemy is. And reality, friends, is this is much bigger than that.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. I just am looking at it and I'm like, wouldn't it have been better if that church was 1,500 people that really deeply loved Jesus and that guy was able to maintain his marriage and his daughter? And, and I say that, and I think there are people out there who go, no.
Yeah.
Tommy, you're talking about 1,500 people as compared to 10,000. But you said in the other podcast, it was like, was it 50% of men, that Christian men don't even read their Bible?
Don't even read their Bible.
So
we're measuring butts and seats.
Right, exactly. And that's all I'm saying. And I understand it, by the way. I get it. So you heard me say, I planted a church. 9 years later, it's probably 50 or 60 people. And to some of you, and I think to old Tommy, that would have been like blasphemous. Bro, what are you doing? Don't you want your church? Don't you want people to know gospel? And that's the tension, isn't it?
That is.
Because, yeah, I do, dude. And because the way evangelicalism has gone, right, and how it's been co-opted and political power and white supremacy and Christian, like so many of the things. Like we've all started to shy away from, I don't really want to share my faith. And that's another tension is the reality is, dude, I love God. He's changed my life. Why wouldn't I want to tell people about that and invite them in on that? But again, the vehicles that we're given and the expertise that we're told to do are so limited.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, I guess I got to do it like this. And then if I'm not good here, friends, think about all the amazing leaders that don't fit this dynamic, great speaker, awesome worship leader, type. That if they were like, oh, do you know that you're included too? And there's so many different other ways that you could start churches and they're happening, friends, by the way, it's happening out there, but that's not by and large, like the big movements that we see in our country.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love that you said that, a friend of UYWI, we want to claim him is he has a show, Ruslan has had an episode where he said, hey, a lot of these charismatic preachers who have built their ministries around themselves, if they hadn't started 10 years ago and were starting today, they probably wouldn't start a church. They'd probably start a YouTube show. Yeah. Because they're good at that. They're good at speaking, they're not good at pastoring people. They're not good at leading. They're not good leaders. And so he's like, those are the people that you're like, and so he talked about like, hey, there's space for people in the kingdom. It doesn't have to look like a mega church. And I do feel that Jesus will say on that day to that pastor who was faithful to his congregation of 30, 40, 50 people, he'll look at them in the eye and he'll say, well done.
Yeah. Well done. Well, also that verse, by the way, not that verse. There's another verse, and it says that, people say, Lord, Lord, we did all these things in your name. We prophesied in your name. We healed in your name. What does Jesus say? Jesus is not like, hey, you did well with those 50 people even. What he says is, away from me, I never knew you. So, and that comes to our theology of work, where a theology of work would say, we're called into all this work, but we're called to co-create with Jesus, not because he needs us. Like Jesus isn't like, oh no, like, what am I going to do if Fredy's not in Long Beach, running this part of the church? Like, he's like, oh man, Fredy, you and I in this season get to co-create these ministries, these relationships, this family, this marriage, these friendships. You get to join in with me, and we'll do this thing together. Why? So that you get to know Jesus in a deeper way. That's the why. But because we have a messed up theology of work, we really do think it's about this stuff. And that's why these metrics are so important to us. And that's why we wear them as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, what church you go to? Hey, what is the next question?
How many people?
How many people? Like, I want to know your scale, right?
I want to know who I'm talking to.
Yeah, who am I talking
and
to,
so if
dude?
you tell me, like, oh, yeah, I got 30 people, it's like, okay, now I'm the alpha here.
Yeah, because, dude, you could only grow it to 30? Yeah.
You know,
And I think, again, all I'm saying is we're challenging the system of it. Like, dude, if you have a church of 20,000, God bless you. I worry about you. I do. Dude, my best friend, when he was going to take over Willow Creek.
You're talking about the Willow Creek.
Yeah. So I'll put him on blast. Steve Carter. Dude, and when he went to Willow Creek to be the teaching pastor, I had a conversation. I was like, I'm worried about you, dude. That's a machine over there. Now, he's super talented, and he thrived in that space. If you care about the Enneagram or you think it's satanic, I don't know, but he's a 3. He's a
that's me.
Achiever, right? He
Yeah.
just, actually, he did really great in that. But you can see how all that blew up with Bill Hybels and the whole deal. Like, just ugly, dude, right? And so even in that, I worry about those pastors. And at the same time, I worry about the pastors that are doing really great work, but they think they suck because they only have 100 people, or they're loving 50 people really well, or they're shepherd. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
yeah. I go, oh man, that's sad.
Yeah.
I don't, because that doesn't lead to the abundant life.
No.
And then that also doesn't allow the pastor and the leader to exhibit and fully experience the kingdom of God, so that they can also be a witness and bring others. You can't lead people where you haven't been. So
Right.
So you got a bunch of pastors out there that are all busted and broken because of the system that we've imposed. Like, this is how you do it. And they're dying, dude,
bro.
on the inside, man.
Yeah,
and I
bro.
just go, and so I've been anti that. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And there's a cost to that.
Yeah. I think here in this situation, we're the body. We're called to pray for one another. There's going to be, maybe there's going to be mega church pastors that watch this episode, that listen to this episode, that get sent this episode. Hey, look at what Tommy's saying about us. And you're going to say, you know what, Fredy and Tommy, you guys are feeding mediocrity, because the church should be big. It should be in the thousands. Churches should have multiple campuses. And that's your right in believing that.
Yeah.
There are those of you who have churches right now of 30, 50, 100 people and are like, yeah, mega churches are evil. Mega churches are da-da-da-da-da. You know what? Screw them. We're the ones that are faithful and righteous for Jesus.
Yeah.
It's a both and,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
The mega church has been a blessing in many ways to this movement and spreading the kingdom and funding, missions and etc. And the local church has also been a blessing to the kingdom. The fact that it's provided certain people longevity into being like, that's the name of the game. The game, man. One of our mutual friends, Larry Acosta would tell me, hey, I want you to be in this for the long haul.
Oh yeah.
The game you're trying to play is longevity. And I don't want
Faithfulness,
you to
yep.
faithfulness. I don't want you to burn out within a decade. I don't want you to punk out. I don't want you to wimp out. I don't want you to be broken. He's like, I want you to last. And when he shifted that perspective for me, it changed the game for me. Tommy, right now, there are people leading organizations, and they're comparing their organizations to other organizations that are probably better funded.
Yeah,
They are in a church that's better funded. How do we, encourage those people who do have the desire to achieve more and to do more, and at the same time remind them of what should be at the forefront of their pursuit of success?
Yeah, I would say something you said earlier too about those people that are like, no, man, like, we got to be excellent. We got to, what was the word you used? About growth. We got to
Yeah, we can't be mediocre.
Mediocre. So, dude, I hate mediocrity. I do. And I agree with you. I think overall, is God working through all these versions of the church and the body of Christ? Absolutely. He's not. I don't worry about the church surviving. God's going to be faithful to his body.
Yes.
Like, I don't worry. However, because I believe that we join in together with God, and we participate in the building of his kingdom, and as he expands his kingdom, we participate in that. And our calling is towards how can we do this better? That's this whole conversation. That's all I'm saying. As I'm like, yeah, how can we do it better? Because I don't think this is working. And we have the numbers to prove it.
Yeah,
it's not working.
It's not working.
So and what you guys always do, it's a little blaming language, is I always have to say, yeah, but my church again. And I'm like, okay, but put your head up a little bit and look at the overall landscape. Are we all sitting here going, we're killing it? No, dude. No. And so I'm calling us to say, can we at least have the conversation, dialogue, and wrestle with the truth and the reality, and say, how can we do this better and change the metrics? How do you measure depth with Jesus? How do you measure depth with God? How do you, and that's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. I get it. But that's the path that God's given us. Dude, I mean, Jesus talks about enter through the narrow gate. It's a narrow path. It's a tough pathway. But that's what we're called to do. We should put our time and energy and effort into that space to try to figure those things out, to grow people deep, for us to grow deep in knowing Christ, rather than all the time and energy and money into going, how can we gather people to have a delicious, easy, feel good moment? And I'm just like, dude, let's put all our effort and energy into that space. In fact, my call would be, let's put all our effort, energy, and money and resources into figuring out how to reach that next generation.
Absolutely.
Because I just go, man, things have changed. Right now, we have the opportunity to try new things out.
Yeah.
And if we know what doesn't work, and we keep on seeing pastors getting put through the grinder, and we keep on seeing young people leaving the church, and we keep on seeing all this, let's put our power, our name, our reputation, our money to the side for a minute, and just go, what would it look like to envision a church that was vibrant?
Right.
Like that's what I'm just calling people to. And I think there's so many different ways to do it. And it's happening, right? We just, our man Abel over here was telling us about this Spanish-speaking church over here in the Valley. That's it's a dope church. And it's an immigrant church, right? But they're doing it, and it's all volunteer-led. And yes, because God's moving in that way. Mm-hmm. I think my point is that we're hampering it by McJesus and trying to always think, and I'm like this too, friends, I'm entrepreneurial, always thinking about the scalability of something and how do you just make it quick and easy and delicious and, when the reality is, it's like Jesus walked with every day, spent time with these 12 knuckleheads and for 3 years, and you know what I mean? And one's even bailed on him. That was God. So, yeah.
By our metrics,
horrible.
Jesus was a bad leader.
By my strategy, I'd be like, God, that is a poor strategy.
3 years and you still got 12.
Right, exactly, dude. Right, you have the 70 and the 120 and the multitudes but I mean, the reality is the experience that those 11 had, or 12, but 11 had. Yeah, it changed the world. Mm-hmm. And so I just think let's think about depth and width. You know what I mean? But again, there's a cost to that, because people are going to look at you. So if you're going to be revolutionary and change that metric, there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
And I think at my core belief, for me, how I've come to these conclusions is I realized at one point, I'd rather be a good man than a great one. And what I mean by that is I'd rather be one that's solid and deep with God, and no one knows my name. Rather than everybody knows my name, and I'm shallow. Because I've seen that story.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And I'm like, I'm not going to sacrifice my family on the ministry altar. I'm not going to sacrifice God's name on the altar of ministry. I'm not going to, like, I've really wrestled through that, and I'm okay with, I'll be honest, it's hard sometimes. But I've chosen certain things over other things. And if God wants to elevate my name or my work or whatever to a certain, let him do it. One of my favorite verses, Jesus goes, hey, don't sit at the seat of honor. Sit at the back. Because if you sit in the seat of honor, somebody more important comes and they ask you to move, you're going to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
If you sit in the back and you get called up, you're honored in front of everybody. But at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter, because when I meet Jesus, I'm fully confident he's going to go, I know you. Did you tell me? Like, he's going to welcome me, because why? Not because of all the things I did, or because the church grew this big, or UYWI got this big, or whatever. He's going to welcome me because we've spent so much time together, both in lament and joy, in all the spaces. I know Jesus. I know God. And God knows me. And that's all there is.
Jeez.
So once I got to that place, that's where I'm able to then start to challenge all the systems, this whole thing we're talking about. Because I'm like, why do we keep on doing this? Can we have the ability to change it, friends. Mm-hmm. We don't have to keep on doing this to people. But that means that people are going to have to let go of some of their power and some of their resources. And so,
yeah. And you're going to have to abandon your ideals of success and your definitions of success and the models that you came from.
Yeah.
Man, for another episode, bro, I would love for us to explore those young leaders that are discontent because they see all the abuse, the mishandling of money, the sexual misconducts and the cover-ups, the pervasive sin, the poor leadership or toxic leadership that exists in their churches. And so they leave to church plant. They feel like, okay, my exit means I need to do my own thing. And what they end up doing is just replicating, because maybe they leave a church of 1,000. They feel they have to get to 1,000 now quick. Okay. And they end up becoming the leaders they left. So I would love to explore that with you,
dude.
In
absolutely.
another episode.
But see, I would say here's one of the connections. So go check out our earlier podcast on money, on the economics of it. It's really important, because the way it's set up, you've got to be able to have you've got to be able to sustain it. Just reality. Yeah. That's just reality. Facts. Provide for your family, all that. So are there other ways that we can do it that are different than that? And we all come from the whole, what do we call it, man?
Bootstrap.
Huh?
What are you talking about?
When we have other jobs, like
bivocational.
Bivocational, yeah, man. I couldn't remember. So we all come from the bivocational spot. Like, we all work multiple jobs so that we could do the work of Jesus, and that's a whole nother thing too, right? The other thing I would say is, if you guys go check out the Futures Here podcast, the very first episode, I think, of that was, I named it, and I'm talking to Steve Carter, and it was The End of the Mega Church, I Hope. And we
I gotta check it out.
And he was mad at me. He was like, bro, why you put me on blast? Like, but we'd explore all this as well. And so it might be something really good to go check out.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, our job is to start the conversation. We hope that you've made it your job to continue the conversation with your friends, with your students, with your youth, whoever you're leading. Send this to people. And if you know any megachurch pastors personally, send it to them. I want to know what they think of about the things that we're saying. I want to add their voices to the conversation. And if you are a pastor or shepherd that has felt for a period of time that, man, I still have the same 50 people, 100 people, whatever it is that God has entrusted you with, and you have felt like a failure, let us know how we could be praying for you. We want this conversation to continue to exist. There is a radical middle that exists, in this topic. And so, as always, we like to say, please leave us a rating and a review wherever you're listening to podcasts. Let us know in the comments what you think, any questions that you may have. Tom and I would love to explore those questions and answer those questions in a future episode.